Welcome to Mudville, podcast about baseball and cinema. I'm Brody Staub.
I'm Nolan Rabine.
We hope you enjoy.
Well, yeah, the other day I was just casually sitting on the chair, as one does. Brody came out and placed his backpack on the ground, sat down on the couch, and just casually stated, "My backpack is full of fruit flies."
Allow me to recount this tale, if I may. As the audience, the dedicated audience is well aware that I've been...
the mud balls.
The mud balls. I've been back and forth between our apartment here in Brooklyn and my hometown in Westchester. And I was in Westchester for a few weeks, so I had a backpack that I left here since before I went back home and started a job that I had brought to the pool with my girlfriend. And in that bag, we had gotten sandwiches that morning, like bagels or something, and had a bottle of wine in there. And I completely...
I think people are putting two and two together at this point.
Forgotten about all those things. And so there was a paper bag full of, everything bagel seeds and seasonings and poppy seeds or whatever, and a bottle of wine. So I opened it up, and it was just like there were fucking fruit flies like flying around everywhere inside my bag. I've never seen anything like it. I'm not normally good with insects, and I was actually very proud of myself in the way that I handled it, which was I opened it. I didn't do a huge ugh or anything, which I flinched for the listening audience,
sure,
which is everybody. But I actually did not do that. I just very calmly closed it back up, brought it over here, put my shoes on, and took it outside and cleaned it out.
I'm proud of you for responding in the face of adversity.
Yeah.
Fruit flies are generally one of the more intimidating species to encounter in the wild.
It is true. You don't want to have to deal with fruit flies. They could swarm you.
They can fuck you up. But anyway. It caused you to be late to the event you were attending, which was
the Yankees facing off against Justin Verlander, which actually went very well that day, which I was shocked. I was on the phone before the game, and I was saying, I don't think that we're in for a good time today. I mean, Nestor pitched great. I thought he was going to get shelled, and Verlander pitched the way that Verlander usually does against the Yankees, which is he allows a run or two, and then we'll walk some people. But usually when he shuts us down, it's because we get rocked and we can't catch up. But the thing that did happen in that game, which is really fun to talk about, is the fact that Giancarlo Stanton must have seen Medusa at a recent date because he is completely made of stone now. I mean, the dude cannot move. It's unbelievable. Watching that happen live, I saw him rounding third. I was like, wait, he's going to get gunned down. And it wasn't even that. He just basically walked into the ball home. It wasn't dramatic as it seemed like it might have been when you are, 60 feet from home with the ball crossing second base on the way back in. It was just a slow little jaunty stroll back around third base and into the catcher's glove.
One of the more unathletic plays in baseball history.
I mean, it's strange. It's getting to the point where the way that we remember, I'll say Manny, because Manny did a lot of weird shit, and a lot of it was not directly tied to the fact that he was just a great hitter and not a great athlete all around, but he's the worst defender ever or something like that.
Sure.
But it's just man, if only he did other stuff. It's
Manny would have those plays where he would make hilarious.
The diving cutoff in center field comes to mind.
The cutoff, or he would
8
go
feet
and
the throw.
He would go talk to the scoreboard operator in the middle of an inning or some shit. So
now Stan's not that goofy. Manny
certainly
was a goofball, but even Ortiz couldn't run. It's just
Manny could hit. Stanton can't hit.
He can hit. He just doesn't hit consistently in the same way.
When he hits, it goes far, but he does not make contact
enough. I don't know. His legacy is going to be interesting.
He's the streakiest hitter I've ever seen.
He is. I still think he's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. Which, if he can,
I don't.
If he can hit, if he crosses 500 homers, which I think is very much on the table, I think he ends up in the Hall of Fame. Which is he's been in the league since what, 2000.
You think Stanton's a Hall of Famer?
Maybe 2010. I think his numbers are going to stack up into a point where, if he wins a couple rings, maybe, which that's a whole other conversation. But if he does, and he hits 500 homers, and he has a career, 260 average, probably 270 average, 500 homers, 260, But anyway, those are like borderline Hall of Fame numbers. 500 hits, 20-something hit, or 500 homers, 22,000-something hits, and like a above 260 average. It's not going to get you in first ballot, obviously, but that's like there are Hall of Famers with similar numbers.
Giancarlo Stanton right now has 42.7 career WAR.
Okay.
Which
Hall of Fame, I think, is 70, actually, so maybe not.
Which is comparable to, if I pull up the list, Jorge Posada finished with exactly 42.7 career WAR.
The thing that people forget about him is how good he was when he was young, which is why I'm saying like he has an argument. We're just seeing like the drop-off years. He's also only 33.
42.7 would put him comparably around the likes of Julio Franco, Adrian Gonzalez, John Lester, Cliff Lee, Mel Stottlemyre, Jack Chesbro, Jorge Posada.
So if you had
Jose
to make a
Canseco,
team of dudes who are not in the Hall of Fame,
Don
but like,
Mattingly, Nelson Cruz,
yeah,
Darryl Strawberry.
But that's all very specific types of players where you remember them as being just not quite good enough, but very solid baseball players for most of their career. Jorge Mattingly specifically, well, a lot of injuries in that list too. But anyway, that's like where he could, like the company that he'll end up keeping. It's just that people are going to remember him on this big stage where he has not been the most athletic specimen on the planet.
He's been out there looking like handsome Squidward.
He does. It's really kind of a shame. But he came into the league at 20 in 2010. So, I don't know. He could keep it up for a few more years. We'll see. I have no idea.
He's a very singular type of player. You don't.
He's he's very polarizing too because my dad hates him. I don't hate him. I'm like frustrated by it.
He seems like he has a good attitude. Like even when he struggles, he seems like he takes accountability and
he does.
He holds himself to a very high standard. And I appreciate that. You know, there are certainly players who have not responded well to some of the criticism from New York fans that Stanton has gotten. And he's never really had any sort of problem with that. So
right.
You do have to give him credit for that. You know, his on-the-field performance is one thing, and it sometimes seems like he can't hit, he can't throw, he can't field, and he can't run, but
he does go through times where that's the case. Also, he's at 1,430 hits right now, so he probably won't cross 2,000.
Yeah,
so,
I'm going to put his Hall of Fame odds like under 2%.
I think that's fair. I had more hits in my head from back in the day.
It was a miserable week for the Yankees prior to the series with the Astros. They were trade deadline losers, according to everybody in baseball media. They could not really pick a direction one way or the other. They did not buy. They did not sell. They acquired reliever Keenan Middleton from the Chicago White Sox and starter Spencer Howard from the Texas Rangers, neither of which are particularly noteworthy moves, neither of which will move the needle in any way. A rival GM described the Yankees as frustrating to deal with at the deadline, saying they didn't really know in which direction they wanted to go. And
I think they had no idea what they wanted to do.
Yeah, it really was a terrible showing from a team that has had quite a few frustrating trade deadlines in the past and has made quite a few boneheaded moves that really turned out to immediately bite them in the ass. Following that up, Anthony Rizzo was placed on the IL for an injury that could be traced back to concussion symptoms that he sustained back in late May in a collision with Fernando Tatis Jr. And I think you have a little more information on this than I do, so I'm going to let you cook with it.
So the thing is that it was not that he was put on for a concussion. He's put on for post-concussion syndrome, which is a very common thing that happens after you have a hit to the head, and it can take months to develop. So there was a thing where he said in an interview with The Athletic after he got hit, he passed all the concussion protocol things, and then eventually just kind of, what was the word? It cascaded into now what is post-concussion syndrome, which is you just constantly headaches, fogginess. Some days are better than others, but it's just you are not at your peak performance. The thing about this that is extremely frustrating is with the Yankees, you cannot take a single thing that they give to the media or to the public in general at face value, because they consistently lie about everything when it comes to players or the front office or their plans.
Is it a Yankees thing, or is it like a MLB front office thing that maybe is a little bit worse in some organizations than others?
I genuinely don't know.
I do see other fan bases talking about this. The front office not being totally honest with the media or with the fans, or
right.
I mean, it's really between the players, the medical staff, and the team itself.
Right.
Anything else is kind of extraneous, but it definitely seems like there are teams each year that sustain more injuries than others, and teams that seem like they have lingering injuries more often than others do, and just teams that don't really seem to deal well with the typical procedures needed have your players recover from certain injuries. And I think, I'm a little bit biased, but I do think that the Yankees would be on that list of teams, especially for the past 5 years or so,
right,
where the rosters have been very different. At least, 2018's roster is very different from 2021's roster, which is very different from this year's roster. But in every case, it feels like the team has just been crippled by injuries every year, whether those are freak injuries being sustained, normal injuries that are turned into lingering, 60-day IL stints, or pitchers being rushed back too early and then breaking.
So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on is you look at Jose Trevino, who a few weeks ago, and that's why I don't know if this is specifically a Yankee problem, but you're right. It very much could be a thing that's all across baseball. I just don't know enough because I don't follow the media for other teams as closely as I follow the Yankees. But Trevino said that he had a wrist thing that was acting up since spring training. The staff was well aware of that since spring, whenever it happened. And there is Boone is quoted in articles saying that no, he's fine. He people had asked him about it. He's like, Trevy's healthy. He's completely fine. And then he says that he's had this wrist thing that had been bothering him for 3 months. So it's hard to. There was a comparison with Judge's toe to Jazz Chisholm's toe, which they had very similar injuries, like the turf toe or whatever. Which I don't even know what turf toe is, to be honest. But it's Judge had a torn ligament. I think I don't whatever. So the Marlins were very upfront about what was wrong with him, and the timeline and all of those. It gets frustrating. Because the Yankees decide to operate like they're a government entity rather than a professional sports team. But I don't know. It's just getting to the point where fans of the Yankees specifically have just lost all confidence in the leadership group that has been running this team for decades now. So people don't have confidence in Brian Cashman anymore at all. After 25 years of helming the team and being the one who is making decisions year in and year out when, he has rings on his resume, which now people are very quick to question whether, how much he had to do with the 90s dynasty, or in 2009, it was just, he just spent all the money. He's difficult to talk about because he's had success in the past, but recently it is very simple to talk about him because he's been terrible for at least 3 years now. You go back to the beginning of the 21 season where they came in with a roster that was very incomplete, not too right-handed, all very slow. And the way that he went to fix that was, plug and playing guys like Greg Allen or pulling up a Trey Ambergy or whatever. And that was the only fun baseball that they played that year. Going into 22, you have the Gio Urshela trade for Josh Donaldson and Rortvedt and Gary being gone and all these things that just completely did not pan out. And then the worst trade deadline that I can remember as a Yankee fan. It wasn't the pieces that were bad. It was just the outcome afterwards. Every single one of them needed surgery right away. Andrew Benintendi is a special case because he had a broken bone in his hand, which is not something that you can really predict. But apparently Frankie Montas was hurt when they got him. It's just, it's just the whole charade has worn thin on fans, and everybody's kind of over it. And now this year is just like a culmination of everything that fans have been warning about for years, which is just the roster's too old. They are not athletic enough. They don't get the big hit. They don't like the contracts that they have are going to hurt them sooner or later. And if they don't win before they start hurting them, it's going to really, really look bad. And that's where we're at. So there's also a ton of underperformance, which goes back to our earlier discussion about the injuries, which is everybody healthy? If they're not, why are they playing? Because they're hurting the team. If they are not hurt and they are playing this badly, that means they are cooked, which is worse. So it's just all, not good. There's a lot to be frustrated about.
The government entity comparison you made, I think, is a very good one because they do certainly...
Why? Because they spend their money poorly and they're overfunded.
Well, sure. They pride themselves so much on their public image of we're the Yankees, we win
know more than you.
championships. We don't allow names on the back of our jerseys because we're a cohesive unit. We don't allow beards. We don't allow yada yada yada.
We don't mess around.
We are the pristine elite organization in Major League Baseball. The buck stops with us. We do things that other organizations don't do, and players want to play for us because we do those things differently. They should be operating under that mentality, whether they're building a roster or hiring staff members,
training staff or medical staff specifically,
training staff specifically, making sure that your players
went out and got the quote unquote best guy,
and you have the best medical staffers in the world treating these players. Going back to what we said, like it's certainly not just a thing where the Yankees are like the only organization that doesn't disclose when their players are more banged up than they would indicate. Like it's definitely a thing that like just happens around the league. But I think when it happens to this extent, and you have Rizzo and Trevino and LeMahieu has been playing like he's hurt all year, and it stacks up to the point where it's just obvious that there isn't a level of honesty being applied to disclosure about players' health, and it really doesn't help the case when it comes right in the middle of a week in which the Yankees were the most confused team at the trade deadline.
They're the last team to make a move.
Yep, the last team to make a move. They didn't do anything major. Their first baseman is now out with post-concussion syndrome. Like their catcher pulls himself out of competition because he feels like he isn't helping the team anymore because of his injuries,
which are months old.
Like we've known about the whole Aaron Judge toe situation. He's come back. He's been awful. I think he was rushed back. Obviously, Carlos Rodon was rushed back. They're going to have to shut him down for the year. And now, like you just said, the icing or the cherry on top or whatever the hell you want to call it, Domingo Germán has now been removed from the team for alcohol-related issues and the fact that he caused a disturbance in the clubhouse, including mocking the teammate Ron Marinaccio as he was packing his bags for AAA.
Which is so shitty.
Cartoon villain behavior. That's really the kind of thing that just gets you knocked out, honestly.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I have to say about that. Is
like we didn't have a Yasmani Grandal, Tim Anderson type story coming out about that afterwards, but yeah, it really.
So yeah, it's like
bad.
You
really
want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but they have done nothing to earn it, and especially this week when we have this day after day a new PR hit. It seems like it really feels like they're asleep at the wheel. And somebody who's supposed to be manning an operation board is just dead or something. Like it's pretty foul.
It's just been. I mean, it could also all stem from, not all, but at least the injury thing. I wrote a whole thread about this yesterday on Twitter. They have been going off of a formula that Cashman started instituting, really, it feels like back in the early 2000s, which is plugging holes with veterans who are going to be cheap that you're going to try to tap into or unlock their previous production. Instead of putting any kind of faith in young players who have shown you that the future could be brighter than what they are currently doing, they routinely try to get guys like Josh Donaldson, or you can name a litany of just like 35-year-olds who they've just picked up off the scrap heap, where they are expecting them to perform like they're in their mid-20s. you can go back to I don't know, a Troy Tulowitzki, a Jay Bruce. I want to say Travis Hafner, but I was thinking it's not him. I think him too. Actually, wait a minute. He was a Yankee, right?
He was a Yankee a year when they had that weird 2013
It was
roster.
the 2013 team.
It was
Travis
like Hafner, Overbay, and Vernon Wells all on the same roster.
Yep.
Just truly absurd.
I think Lance Berkman hit a home run for the Yankees in the playoffs one year or something. There's just
that was a little bit before, but yeah.
But no, but that's the same thread. That's what I'm saying. Raul Ibanez, although Raul Ibanez played well here, and that's the thing. Like there are some examples of it working, like Ibanez or Matt. I almost said Matt Chapman, Matt Carpenter. There are far more who just completely shit the bed. Jay Bruce retired. After like 3 weeks. Chris Carter got cut. I mean, it's just like,
there's certainly precedent for, signing a veteran who then becomes a lightning rod off the bench and provides a spark. Like, you obviously should be signing veterans to like complement your young talent, to try to like steer these guys off in the right direction.
You want people who've been there or who've won.
The problem is that they've surrounded Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge, and I think in their head Giancarlo Stanton is also part of that core, which he just cannot be. They've surrounded these guys with players who are older than them.
LeMahieu, too, by the way, is part of that core for them.
Guys who, like we've said, can't move, can't hit, can't field, can't run.
Man, can't move, can't hit, can't field, can't run. That's winning baseball right there.
Dear God. When they should be seeing Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge at this point as the old guys.
Right. And you look around the league, and the teams that are succeeding are A, athletic, B, offensive powerhouses, which, that's a whole other topic of conversation, is the ability to be able to hit. There are teams who can succeed in the regular season without being, like top 3 offenses. But if you want to win the playoffs, you need to be able to hit. And the Yankees consistently don't do that. And they've like tripled down on pitching. And then, when that doesn't work out, which example this season, other than Garrett Cole and Clark Schmidt. Clark Schmidt's been good. You end up burning out the bullpen, which was a strength for the first few months, but it ends up you cannot have like 6 different dudes throwing 2 innings a night for the whole season. Their arms are gonna die, which is where we're at now, which is where a lot of these guys are no longer reliable. Like Clay Holmes is now kind of the only guy out of the bullpen that I don't worry about giving up leads, or if they have a lead. Michael King as well. But it's mismanagement. It feels like ineptitude. And the thing is, like, as a fan, you see the vision, right? Like, you know what they're going for. It's just that it just completely falls on its face, like, year after year, whether it's in October or whether it's in, like, June. It's like the thing either falls apart in the summer, like 2021. Yeah, they made the playoffs in 21. But last year, it just completely, the wheels fell off in the ALCS. It's just, and everybody knew that in the DS, they were kind of playing over their skis a little bit because they almost lost that series to Cleveland. It's just, whatever. It's just all very frustrating. There's a lot to be said more than this, where you can really do a very, very deep dive on the job that Cashman has done.
We've gone pretty deep.
Like, no, but I'm saying
you can
even
go
further
deeper,
into like what Hal has allowed. And now there's like, whispers about Hal refusing to allow Cashman to sell off a lot of these rental pieces, which, have you heard about this?
No.
So there is a story that is not, I don't think it's really like corroborated by any
so it's probably
nonsense. I mean, Michael Kay said it on the show today, which if he says it, that means that there's some kind of truth to it, because he's not one to just spit out hearsay. But allegedly, Cashman had deals in place to trade like Wandy and Glaber and Bader, and like all these dudes who were rental pieces, IKF I think too, and Hal apparently stopped them from doing that. He said we're not going to do that. You can't give up on the season. Basically, we're not throwing in the towel. He won't let him do that. So, if that is indicative of things that he's done in the past, where it's we can't go out and drop a ton of money on a younger guy or whatever, whatever it is. It's just it's whatever you want to extrapolate from that story, if it's true, which it seems like there's some truth to it. I don't know how much, but
I believe that.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is I completely believe it because I think Hal fancies himself as a baseball guy, and I don't think he's a good one. So it's, there, like the ownership is really starting to like go to war with the fans also over, he's like, I don't know why they're upset in June, which now this is a few months ago, and he's like, I don't get it. We're a few games over 500, and it's like, well, we're not upset necessarily just about this year, Hal. It's a lot more than that. So it just feels like at this time, this is like one of the worst eras to be a Yankee fan, probably since the 80s.
It just feels boring.
It's boring and
dry.
directionless.
Yeah.
There's no easy way out of this.
Lifeless.
There's it just feels like the future right now. Like in 2017, it felt like, man, here we go. We're coming a game off of the World Series.
Yep.
Like the future is bright. We have all these young stars. They're not even expensive. They can go out and get some real talent to add to this. Bryce Harper is about to be a free agent. Just like all these things. And
they're supposed to go on a huge spending spree in
right.
2019, which they did not do.
Right. It's been a very disappointing few years. And this is, I mean, we're getting toward in 2017, I think we were all kind of thinking they will probably win at least a few World Series within the next 5 to 6 years.
Well, at least a few
maybe
within
not
5 to 6 years.
That's not
is
fair.
Pretty.
But, I do remember us saying there's no way that we don't win at least one with this roster because they had flexibility financially. They had a core of dudes who seemed like they were ready to go out and win. And then you add Giancarlo Stanton, you add an MVP, you add Garrett Cole, whatever. It's just all these pieces that were falling into place where it's like, this has to be the team. And we are now kind of on the back end of that window where all these guys are now exiting the period where they can be viable core members of a championship team.
Right.
Which now if you're going to whip this team into shape and make it a contender, you have to add a lot of youth, you have to add a lot of athleticism, and really a ton of offensive talent because the guys that you were banking on are not bank-onable. And that's where we're at. So that's why Yankee fans are frustrated. They wasted the potential that they had shown years ago. And it seems like there's no way out except for despair for a few years. So, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, at least we're not the White Sox.
At least we're not the White Sox.
I want to talk about that.
That's worse. Man. Yeah, we can talk about that.
So,
some fun stuff going on in Chi-Town on the south side.
A few players just today who have recently exited the Chicago White Sox organization have put the organization on blast for its lack of direction or clubhouse culture or anything. The previously mentioned Keenan Middleton basically said he was incredibly frustrated with how things operated in Chicago. As soon as he found out he was traded to the Yankees,
Can I pause you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I actually really like Keenan Middleton now because he played really well against the Astros yesterday, and he showed up. He said, my old team sucks, and I'm glad that I'm here because I just want to win, which, somebody should probably tell Keenan this is not the place to do that right now. But I like where his head's at.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, he's definitely endeared himself to the fans with that one. But yeah, Keenan Middleton expressed displeasure. Lance Lynn, who was just acquired by the Dodgers from the White Sox, said, I was there a lot longer than Key, and that is absolutely correct. In addition to Lance Lynn and Keenan Middleton, they traded Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez for the Angels for Edgar Caro and Kai Bush, the pitcher, 2 prospects there, and they acquired Nick Nastrini back from the Dodgers.
So
for
a
Lance
bucket of
Lynn.
balls.
No, those are some decent prospects. But,
but they're prospects. Again,
compared to what the White Sox thought that they were going to be doing in 2018, 2019.
It's very
Massive
hard to,
disappointment.
I don't know, unless it's a top 15 prospect and the Baseball America thing, it's like you're buying a lottery ticket, as all the media always says. Most of them don't pan out. So
I don't really like that saying, to be honest, if you're buying a lottery ticket. I think it misrepresents what prospects have become because, if you're calling, Jackson Holiday or even
but those are top 15 guys. That's
sure, but, even a guy, say somebody who's, top 50, the Mets got Luis Angel Acuna last week.
Okay, but he's not going to be Ronald Acuna.
No, but there's a big amount of middle ground between being Ronald Acuna and being described as a lottery ticket, which, I think of and I think 1 in a million hits. And that's not the case with prospects. I'd say more often than not at this point, top prospects prove to be at least serviceable.
That's
big
fair.
leaguers,
I mean, it is a story when they don't, so that kind of proves the point. You have a good it's a good point there. Maybe not lottery ticket. We can come up with a better analogy.
Yeah, and then of course the other night things went from bad to worse in Chicago when Tim Anderson.
You know what it is? You're buying like a show pack.
No, the show packs are even worse.
Yeah, that's
I hate show packs.
All right, but one of the ones that's like guaranteed 85 plus or something. It's like there's a chance you get what you want.
You're getting a chase pack.
Most likely, you're just going to end up with someone that you're going to end up selling again in the future. Anyway, yeah, the White Sox are going back to when, April or May, with that radio call that got around a lot on Twitter.
Viral fan who called in, was super passionate about how everything sucks, and
that was amazing.
Yeah, it was great. We've talked about it before.
We have. That was fantastic. So the White Sox have a very well documented at this point recent history of being completely inept and directionless, and it just keeps getting worse. I think everybody kind of already knew that things were bad there, and now that light is kind of being shed on just how bad, it's like, oh my God, people really were not talking enough about how dysfunctional this locker room or this front office, this leadership has been, which, the fact that they have gotten nothing out of a core of extremely talented baseball players. You go to, the 2021 White Sox, they're favorites for the World Series, I think.
I think, at least favorites for the AL Central.
Yeah, well, that doesn't mean much.
Yeah.
But, Cease, Giolito,
Lance Lynn at the time. Yeah.
Either way, speaking of Eloy and Luis Robert, Grandal, Jose Abreu, they've had extremely, extremely talented players on both sides of the ball for a long time, and they have done absolutely nothing with it. And it's been mostly a product of dysfunction in the locker room and bad leadership, which is very frustrating if you're a baseball fan for the White Sox. It's like knowing that you have talent and they're doing nothing with it. That's where we're at as Yankee fans, and it's annoying. So
times like 10 with the way that they've been performing. It's been a disaster of 2 years for the White Sox at this point. Everybody has been, shitting on them all year. They've been one of the laughing stocks of baseball.
Going back to bringing in Tony La Russa.
Yeah, that was truly, I think, the move that tanked the franchise. You want to pin their failures back to anything. That's when it all started, and I think they still have that post La Russa stink in that clubhouse lingering. But now everybody's talking about how their shortstop got, as Chris Tucker would say, knocked the fuck out.
He got absolutely slept.
Everybody knows what we're talking about at this point, I assume.
I don't
know any baseball podcast, listen to anything. But in Cleveland the other night, Tim Anderson tagged Jose Ramirez a little too hard. He took exception to that. The two of them literally squared up.
I've never seen that.
I've never seen it in a baseball game, too.
It was fisticuffs, like an old 20s cartoon.
Yeah, straight up. Jose Ramirez caught Tim Anderson in the jaw. Anderson went down.
Tim Anderson tagged Jose Ramirez, so Jose Ramirez tagged him right back.
The announcers yelled, "Down goes Anderson, down goes Anderson." It became this
so good
whole moment. So, and a lot of people are comparing it to like Robin Ventura, a guy who had like a very successful career, in his case much more successful than Tim Anderson, and he's mainly remembered as the guy who got his ass beat by Nolan Ryan.
By Nolan Ryan.
Yeah, it's like
when he was 20 years younger than him.
It's a little chilling to think that you can play for 20 years in this game in some cases.
Well,
and like your entire legacy can come down to getting hit once.
There are
you cannot get hit. You got to have your head on a swivel.
There are so many examples of baseball players who are remembered for the wrong thing. I mean, look at Bill Buckner. Like, Bill Buckner, I don't know much about him, but I do know that he was a great, great baseball player for a very, very long time.
You just had a ball go through his legs.
And he had a ball go through his legs in 1986, and that's all anybody ever knows.
But even that's different than being remembered as the guy who started a fight and then got knocked on his ass.
I remember Tanya Sturts for getting kicked in the face in a fight, so it can go both ways, too. And that in a good way, by the way. That was in a Red Sox-Yankees brawl, and Tanya Sturts came up bloody, and I was like, that's my guy!
That's a Yankee. Toxic masculinity.
Well,
style.
It's different when it's baseball. It's more fun. If you're going to fight the Red Sox, I have a lot of respect for you as a Yankee.
Yeah, I think one thing that...
Remember Tyler Austin?
Oh, that was great, yeah. I think one thing that certainly needs to be mentioned when you're talking about the fight is the fact that Jose was really swinging blindly.
He got lucky. It was a lucky shot.
It was a very,
His
very
eyes
lucky
were literally
shot.
like pointed at the ground if they were even open.
Tim, he took one swing at Tim. I think he got him like in the shoulder or something, and then Tim took 2 shots at him and missed. Point Jose was like flailing rapidly, but luckily for him, he had a closed fist and he hit Anderson right across the jaw, and Anderson just went down. On replay, it didn't look like he even got him that hard, at least to me, but like
I think he got him in the right spot. I don't think it had anything to do with the strength of it.
Yeah,
he just
had to be
old glass jaw Tim.
That's brutal. I mean,
it is
terrible, but what a fall from grace. Socially for Tim Robinson. Tim Anderson.
I did really like Tim Anderson. I always used to go for him in my show franchises because I'd play as the Yankees and they always needed a shortstop. So I'd go for Tim Anderson because he was high contact, athletic dude who seemed likable. I liked him because of like the whole fucking Josh Donaldson thing from last year. I was like, yeah, Tim Anderson, you fucking tell him he's an asshole.
And that's because everybody hates Josh Donaldson.
I think people also don't like Tim Anderson, but everybody hates Josh Donaldson more.
And in that case, it was just so obvious.
Yeah. And then he went full Antonio Brown on Twitter after this thing, which is really funny.
I heard today Tim Anderson apparently got a woman pregnant who wasn't his wife recently, which caused a lot of problems for him socially. And now he's like statistically one of the worst players in all of baseball this year. So
Tim, I'd call this a great year.
I'd call this the ATL for Tim Anderson, the all-time low. Not Atlanta.
Okay. I think you're probably onto something there.
Yeah,
I think about that a lot with athletes because they until they get to the majors, they are the best at everything they ever do. Mm-hmm. And they are studs and stars, and everybody thinks that they're the shit forever. And the second they get to the majors, if they're also not the shit there, they are shit. So it's, probably the first time a lot of these guys go through any kind of...
and that's a drastic shift.
Yeah, any kind of period where they're not through just shit.
Mentally.
Yeah. It's got to be difficult. And especially if you're on a losing team and you're playing well, which he was for a long time, because you're doing everything you can, and it's just not correlating to wins.
Mm-hmm. Tim Anderson's also like one of those guys who does have a very concerning profile, like in regards to age. Like he's always been a free swinger. Like he's a very high chase rate guy. He relies on speed, and like usually those are the type of players who like when
he's like BABIP Jesus, which is not good for the long term.
When they start to age, like they get past their age 30 season, those guys typically tend to regress at a pretty quick pace, but nothing like this. Like Tim Anderson should be considerably better than he has been this year.
Yeah. If you don't know the way that BABIP is kind of used, I think the average is like 300, I want to say. So anything that's like way above 300 means that you're going to come back to earth. Anything that's way below 300 means that you're getting unlucky, and it's probably going to turn around at some point. So it's just like that's just the way that baseball works. If you get the bat on the ball, pretty much 1 out of 3 times it should land, statistically. So that's why. And I think Tim Anderson used to sit around like 370 or something, which is
that's nuts.
Like it just means that you're either getting very lucky or you're beating things out, or what you just said, basically the tools that you rely on that end up going when you get older. So, or, your luck starts to change. So it's just, maybe not great things coming for old TA7.
Maybe not.
Out there on the south side.
Let's talk some trades.
Yeah. Why not?
This past week was the trade deadline. We released our most recent episode about Barbie and Oppenheimer with our good buddy Seamus just before the trade deadline concluded. So, first of all, if you haven't checked that episode out yet, absolutely go do it after this
scorcher.
one. We loved that one. We had a very good time with that one.
If you are bored, if you're like driving across the state or something and you have like 2.5 hours to kill,
oh man,
good way to do it.
Highly recommend.
We need to go into advertising,
but
yeah, just crush that. This episode is sponsored by our last episode.
This episode is sponsored by the Mudville Podcast. But yeah, so we haven't talked about the trade deadline since the trades have happened. At this point, we've got a few days to reflect on them. So we've seen a couple of teams, either pick it up or really flounder out of the gate. Best example of that probably being the Angels, who very notably did not trade Shohei Ohtani. As we mentioned before, they traded away their catching prospect Edgar Quero and pitcher Kai Bush to get Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez. They also acquired C.J. Cron and Randall Grichuk from the Rockies. By all accounts, a successful buy, only to go out there and lose 6 in a row.
So that's
including a sweep against the Seattle Mariners.
They haven't won a game.
No, not one.
Did that?
Not even one.
So if you're Shohei Ohtani, right? You see the team go all out, buy because you're leaving. Everybody knows you're leaving.
Mm-hmm.
You know you're leaving. Artie Moreno knows you're leaving. Fans know you're leaving. So they're like,
conclusion.
We've got one last ditch, like death shakes. What's it called? Death rattle.
Sure.
Trying to make something happen, and it has completely failed. And that's really, I'm torn between if it's funny or sad. Because if I was an Angels fan and this was happening, and you go out and you're like, "This is it. We've got Ohtani. He's leaving, but whatever, because we just went all out. Maybe we can win while we got him."
Balls to the wall.
Yeah, and then it just completely fucking falls apart
Instantly.
Oh my god!
You don't even win a game.
There's no like there was no first game back. It's like, all right, everybody looks great. Here we go, and then it all falls apart. It's just you think that going into it you're gonna be fine. And then it just completely fucking fails.
You don't get to experience a single win before you're already at your lowest playoff percentage of the year.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's over.
That's
it's
so
basically
sad.
over. There's almost nothing they can do.
Unless they cook up 10 wins in a row.
I was about to say, they need to go like
They're
10
already
and 3 in
like
their next
7 out of the
like,
playoff
few
spot.
series.
Maybe 8 at this point. God damn.
There's nothing they can do.
So depressing for the Angels.
Immediately failed.
The most incompetent organization in all of baseball strikes again.
Yep.
They're going to have Ohtani leave, and then it's going to get really, really bleak. Even bleaker than it's already been.
It's going to be really funny when people track whoever they pick with the compensatory pick they get for Ohtani leaving.
You know what they should do? Yeah. They should give John Fisher a team in Anaheim and keep Oakland in Oakland and just get rid of the Angels. And actually move the Angels to Las Vegas.
Mm.
And then trade Mike Trout.
2 teams in L.A. Nobody cares about the other one that much.
I mean, what is the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim? That's not anything.
That's fair, too.
That
doesn't make sense.
It's like schizophrenia. Like, what?
That's like saying the New York Mets of Flushing.
The New York Jets of East Rutherford.
Yeah. It's like, dude, it's pathetic. It's like, it just doesn't, I don't know. It's just weak. But everything about this organization is just sad.
The headline of people who were actually traded outside of Shohei Ohtani, who was not, would be the New York Mets instantly pivoting to a sell.
Hilarious.
So funny. And trading they traded 3 very old pitchers for a pretty nice return. They dealt
3. Oh, David Robertson.
Yeah, they dealt. The first one was David Robertson, who they traded to the Marlins. They got back Marco Vargas and another prospect whose name escapes me. But then they dealt Max Scherzer, of course, to Texas after it became clear that they did not intend to win this year or next, according to what Max then leaked to the press, which was so funny. But they traded him to Texas for the baby brother of their arch rival's best player, a.k.a. Ronald Acuna Jr.'s little brother, Luis Angel Acuna. They also ate a ton of Scherzer's contract money to make this happen. Then did the same thing, trading Justin Verlander back to the Houston Astros for what I thought was a very great return. Drew Gilbert, who was the Astros' first rounder last year out of Tennessee, a guy who I was pretty terrified to have to watch play in Houston for a decade.
Yeah, now he won't. He's going to waste away in Flushing.
And then Ryan Clifford, who is a 19-year-old lefty hitter I believe he's in high A still, but one of the most promising teenage hitting prospects in all of baseball for sure.
So real quick, because I'm just curious, are you in favor of or against what the Mets did?
I think that's such a dense question because
but no middle ground. Like, you're not, like they should have done this or they should not have done this. Which one?
Like the trades specifically, or this entire
what they did.
Process?
Their
signing
deadline.
Scherzer. Oh, just their deadline.
The deadline. Good or bad?
I would say good, given the circumstance they were in.
Interesting. I disagree.
I think it's very fair to disagree. I think we could agree on exactly what they did and agree on the values of the players exchanged and then I could still say I think this was good and you could say this was bad. And both of them would probably be pretty fair.
Yeah.
I think just to zoom out a little bit and look at their process for the entire year, it is very funny the hard pivot that they had to make from we're signing everybody. Right. We're signing Justin Verlander. We're getting Carlos Correa. We're even going to sign. We're going to get everybody. We're signing. Yeah, that whole saga. But they were going to sign every player in baseball because they had the richest owner and they could spend money and fuck you. And not even 5 months later, it all fell apart. And now they're pivoting to, we are acquiring all of the prospects.
And we're not going to compete for 3 years.
Yeah, and we're not competing until 2026.
Yeah. So this is why I'm against. Because the thing that Steve Cohen has that nobody else has, obviously, is money. So what money allowed them
that
to...
much money.
The type of money that he has is to a degree that nobody else in the league is even close to. Where it just basically does not affect the team. So that's the superpower that he has. So they are able, with that kind of money, to get out of these contracts. Because if you have a team I'll even just use the Yankees. The Yankees have made very questionable signings of late. But the Mets did that and immediately dealt them and ate most of the money, which is not a thing that other teams do. So that is what
can do.
So that is a thing that all these teams don't have the ability to do. You make a mistake on your big signing, you're locked in. Doesn't matter. Excuse me. What the Mets have the ability to do with Cohen is take on that money and say, you know what, we have to restart. We have to. This didn't work. We have to eat it. But the thing is, you had the ability also to keep these guys. Like Scherzer and Verlander, yes, they're old, but they had been good. And now, Quintana is your number one starter next year with Senga. This team won 100-plus games last year, right? Everything fell apart this year. I wanted the Yankees to punt on the season, so I'm not against punting in general as a concept. But when you have a team that proved that they had the ability to win last year, you should not be selling off your pieces that can make you competitive the next season when you also have the money to go out and do the right thing in free agency, which would be to spend to grab high-end talent. And now, if they add any high-end talent this offseason, you're starting from zero. So I just don't really, especially when the money doesn't affect you, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why you would do this when you could have just kept them, paid them out until their contracts were up, and hopefully try to add enough to get the right the right pieces to add, more and make an actual competitive team. It just doesn't make sense at all. And it's not like you're adding, like, I know, like, the guys that they acquired immediately went to 1 and 2 in their farm system. So, like, their prospects that they got were effective for them and what they needed. But these are not can't miss blue chip. Elon Musk has broken my brain.
Jesus.
Blue chip prospects. They're guys who on most other teams would be towards the middle of like 5 to 10.
No, that's not true.
Organizationally, I'm saying they're not top 5 organizational prospects for half the league.
Yes, they are.
I don't know about that.
All those guys are.
Really?
Maybe not Clifford yet, but there are people who think he's even more valuable than Drew Gilbert. But Gilbert and
if Luis Angel Acuna was in the Orioles system, and I know they're a special case, but I'm just saying, where would he rank?
They are the most extreme example. If Acuna was in the Orioles system, I would put him behind Jackson Holliday, of course. I'd put him behind Cowser a bit.
If he was in the Yankees, don't have a great farm system. He would not be above.
I would
Pereira or Dominguez.
He'd be. I think he'd be he'd be. I'll answer about the Orioles first. I would put him like on the tier with like Colton Cowser, Jordan Westberg, and Kobe Mayo, like the guys who were pretty much on the verge of the big leagues, or in some cases in the big leagues already, who I think are going to be serviceable big leaguers and likely all-stars for quite some time.
I'm surprised they didn't sell off more of those guys.
Me too. Yeah.
We can talk about the Orioles later, but anyway.
We certainly can.
Yes. Either way, my reasoning is just that these guys also are not going to help you in next year, which is why they said 2026 is when we're looking to compete now. 2025, 2026, whatever.
Right.
And if it was to lie to get Max Scherzer to agree to the deal, then okay, like, well done, Billy Epler. I think that's not something that teams would do, which is just to lie about when you're actually looking at competing. I don't know, just the Mets seem to have this whole plan, which is based around building up the farm system, which with this kind of money you don't need to do. You can get a couple great prospects, which, look at Brett Beatty and Alvarez, who were their huge prospects coming into this season, and they haven't been lighting the world on fire. So it just goes to show again, prospects are great. They just you can't rely on them to win when you're expecting them to carry a team. So sure. I don't know. It's just it's an interesting decision, I think.
You want to talk about the Orioles?
Yeah. Why not?
Sure, yeah. So like we just said,
the old jumping Jack Flash.
The Orioles, currently tied for the MLB lead in wins at 70, believe that or not, are now firmly in the contention window a little bit before they expected. It certainly became a question of how closely they would stick to their plan, or if they would deal some of these prospects that we've been talking about for some guys who were rumored to be available. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. We'll never know. They'd only ended up acquiring Jack Flaherty. They traded infielder Cesar Prieto, pitchers Drew Rom and Zach Showalter in the deal. Some people expected the Orioles to do more. I know a while back we speculated that they could have been in the market for Corbin Burns. Obviously, the Brewers were not sellers, so that did not come to transpire. But the Orioles kept it pretty conservative.
Not a lot of teams sold.
No, they stuck close to the plan, and they felt like they could contend this year just by adding that one pitcher to their team. He looks really good so far. His one start since, his velocity's up. It's a very good organization for developing pitching. They've gotten a lot these past 2 years out of guys that weren't expected to be all that good. So, more power to them. Like, if they think they can win with that, and if they think that is what is going to lead them to the most long-term success, then I think it's very possible that they could succeed with that plan.
So this all flies in the face of what I was just saying. But the thing is with the Orioles prospects that they are using to win is these are all, not all, most, they're first-round picks that they got from tanking for years. So
threw away 5 years.
They threw away 5 seasons, which the Astros did the same. Look how it worked for them. This is this is like,
we shouldn't talk about how they threw away 5 years or they might fire us.
it's true. We're gonna get fined by the Angeli.
What we're alluding to is they let a broadcaster, Kevin Brown, go. It's being
I think he was
reported.
suspended. I don't think he was fired.
Yeah, okay. It's being reported that they took him off the air for comments that he had made about the team's past lack of success against the Rays,
So
which
the
they
comments-
lost all of their past 16 series. I watched the clip waiting for him to say something even a little bit inflammatory, and he didn't. So
and also it was a graphic, and which means that there was a whole production meeting where that was part of the plan for the night, which is you put up, here's the graphics that we have, this is what we're going to talk about. The Orioles have not won a game against the Rays in the last 2 years, and guess what? Now they're
finally starting to.
Yeah, but it was 3 out of the 5 that they've seen this year. They beat them.
They had lost 16 series in a row because they were the worst team in baseball for 5 years.
So that's the thing. You, as an organization, had that as the marching orders, that we were going to lose, we weren't going to field competitive teams, and now when a broadcaster brings it up and says in a complimentary way, by the way, now we're beating this team.
Wasn't even critical of a process that can
It's
very
stating a
easily
fact.
be criticized.
Yes.
Evan Drellig last week, he getting into it with some Orioles fans on Twitter. I don't even think he was specifically calling them out, but he tweeted you could call the process of just throwing out 5 years and subjecting your fans to a half decade of misery.
Yeah.
You could describe that as gutless, and maybe I would. He said,
It's pathetic. To be honest,
it is. It's the Orioles obviously did it perfectly. They utilized those 5 years.
Their picks are good now.
They're gonna have superstars on their roster for 10 years, and maybe they're gonna win a few chips because of that. The Astros did. It was the same thing. Mike Elias, they brought him over from Houston, so it was a very intentional procedure from the start. And it looks like it's going to lead to long-term success for them. But there are quite a few organizations for whom that doesn't work at all. And something else Evan Trellick said on that thread was, if you're doing that, if you're throwing away years and you're not leading to any success, then what is your talent?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Why are you continuously being hired and employed in big league front offices?
Right. That's a very fair question.
That's absolutely true.
That's what, this is now they're reaping the benefits of being terrible. So if they don't allow their broadcasters to talk about that, I don't really get what they thought they were doing, because then, were you terrible on purpose? Is that what you're saying? Were you terrible by accident? Because that's the question that you then have to ask. If you are so sensitive to your broadcast team talking about the fact that you were not good for years, does that mean that it was not on purpose? Because it's you're ashamed of it, or is it that you're ashamed that you had to do that, or because I don't know, whatever. We don't have to get into it.
It reeks of trying to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. Back to the deadline moves. You were very much buying into the thought that the Orioles are going to be big time buyers at this deadline way back in April. I think you had Corbin Burns. I think one of us had said Josh Hader, I think, as well. But
I was surprised he didn't get dealt.
I know. I'm surprised Soto didn't get dealt, to be honest. But they are in a position now where they really are. This is their league, even not the division. This is their league to lose. I think the Rangers are, a threat, but they don't seem as complete. I don't think their pitching is going to make the make the long run that they would need to in the bullpen, especially on the back end. They don't have the strengths that the Orioles have, which is a very strong back end of the bullpen, good middle relief, and 3 to 4 good starters that you can rely on. And a lineup that can put up tons of runs on a given day.
Right.
Which obviously the Rangers can definitely hit. They have pretty good starting pitching, maybe 2 or 3 guys. And Chapman has been good this year, so their back end, I guess, is fine, depending on how you want to look at it and what you think of Aroldis Chapman, which we are not huge fans of him in big spots on this podcast. So I don't know. The Astros are always a threat. They look human this year. I don't know.
Certainly note that on the night they traded for Verlander back, Framber Valdez went out and threw a no-hitter.
When you have your other guys getting beat up on by a Yankees lineup that really kind of
sucks.
Is not doing it. Not great. The Yankees put up a ton of runs in that series. Anyway, the Astros are always a threat. The Rangers look good. Aside from that, I mean, the Mariners, the AL Central is a joke. I don't know who's beating them. The Rays obviously are a threat, but
like anybody in the AL,
yeah.
It's anybody beating the Orioles have to be the Rays, the Blue Jays, the Astros, or the
Blue Jays.
Those are the Rangers.
Why does Andrew Vaughn
Or
look
Seattle?
like he was?
I was gonna say he looks like a Nazi.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. He looks like
a German commander.
He should be holding an MP40.
Yeah.
I've never seen him without a hat or helmet.
Me
on.
neither. I didn't realize how much he looked like Christoph Waltz.
Wow, man, he really needs to keep that. Keep his head affectations on.
Yeah, for real.
Sorry, Andrew Vaughn. I'm sure you're a very nice guy.
I'm sure you're not a white supremacist.
It's a low bar. Anyway, oh my God,
I really
look at him.
I know, dude.
He's kind of scary looking.
I really liked what.
Apologies, Andrew Vaughn.
I really liked what the Cleveland Guardians did at the deadline, trading Aaron Savali for Kyle Manzardo, and then trading Josh Bell.
Josh Bell was their biggest free agent signing in franchise history.
Yeah.
They dealt him 5 months later.
Well, they traded him for Gene Segura, who they immediately cut, and the prospect Khalil Watson, who had a lot of hype last year before he got suspended for pretending to shoot an umpire.
That will do it. If you're curious, that'll get you.
So clearly Cleveland made a couple of moves here to establish Kyle Manzardo as their clear first baseman of the future. I think he is one of the biggest winners from this deadline in general. He goes from being blocked in a Tampa Bay Rays system that is known for platooning guys, really just being the worst,
plug and play,
the worst possible organization to be a part of from a player prospect standpoint. Now he gets
that's
sent,
not necessarily true because you might get given a shot more than most other teams.
Yeah, but he was blocked by several players.
If you want to talk contracts and consistent playing time, that's another whole other conversation.
That's what I'm talking about is contracts and playing time.
Yes.
Now Kyle Manzardo is part of the Guardians organization, and he looks like he is going to be a lineup staple for quite some time, and I expect to see him in the pros very, very soon. And then lastly, they traded Ahmed Rosario for Noah Syndergaard.
I was very confused about that.
I don't know or care about that move, to be honest.
I just don't get it.
The Dodgers traded for
why would you do that?
A bunch of guys who were among the worst statistical players in the league this year. Like they traded for Ahmed Rosario, Lance Lynn, like we mentioned.
Joe Kelly.
Joe Kelly, and there was one more too who I am blanking on. Kike Hernandez.
Kike, yes. So,
weird deadline for the Dodgers.
Weird deadline for everybody. Honestly, this was like one of the stranger ones that I can remember because there was a lot of like margin moves, not a lot of big names, obviously, and this is more just general. We've deep divot.
We've talked about the big ones,
but it's just been. I think the reason has to be because of the amount of playoff teams that are now in the league, which is 6 from each league, right? So 12 playoff teams, which means that teams who were bubble teams now used to be teams who were long out of it because if you weren't winning your division or if you weren't the second best team in your division, if your division was good, you were screwed. So now with all these teams who are on the fringe that feel like, all we have to do, like the Cubs. Like the Cubs just had to go out and add like a piece or two, and all of a sudden, hey, now we are
talk about Jeimer Candelario.
Yeah,
who showed up. He went
Candelario,
like 8 for his first 9.
They put up like 35 runs in their first 3 games. Or
I know.
Like that.
Super impressive.
But
that was one of the last ones I was going to mention.
So, like my point being now, the playoff format has created an environment now around the deadline, which is a lot less frantic. Which I don't think it's great for baseball, to be honest. I think the more playoff teams is. But the deadline is so fun. And having like teams have to, throw their prospects around like their prospects and not treat them like they're already here, creates a lot of movement in places where you might not have teams with, a chance really to sell off their stars if they're not planning on keeping them or they're not doing anything. And all of a sudden, hey, now you can rebuild quicker. And now it's going to be a lot harder to do that moving forward because the deadline is typically where you do stuff like that. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting moving forward to see how it affects teams. But yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
Look at the Nationals. They now are going to probably be competitive within the next, 2 years, maybe.
Let's say 3.
Maybe 3 years, whatever. But most of that now is because of the deal from Soto. So it's
James Wood. They just drafted Dylan Cruz. That's going to be the future of their outfield.
Yeah, they're going to look pretty good very soon. So not very soon, but soon enough.
The last two deals that I wanted to mention today, a couple of pitchers on the move. Michael Lorenzen got traded to the Philadelphia Phillies.
The Royals did not do as
pretty
much
good
as
in his debut. And then the Cardinals traded Jordan Montgomery to the Texas Rangers. They got back Tekoa Roby, starter, and another
take
prospect.
A shot at that one?
No. Tekoa Roby, I think.
I have no idea how to say it.
And then another prospect I'm not quite familiar with named Sagasi. I don't know.
The Cardinals did say they were going to trade off everybody. They traded off, 2 guys? So not really sure what their plan is for next year because this team is not doing it.
Nope.
And going back to the Michael Lorenzen thing, they also traded off a bullpen guy. Barlow, that's right. So they don't have a lot of talent at all. And they didn't trade for a lot of talent, and they didn't trade any of their pieces.
They just
that had
kind of
value.
existed.
So they're going nowhere quick, which everybody already knew. Yeah, I don't know. The state of baseball is not as changed as it usually is post-deadline.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a dud, but there were a lot of really interesting moves made at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
does anything that happened change your predictions for either division winners or playoff series?
Not particularly. I'd say I'd basically stick to what I had predicted to begin with.
I think the Cubs make the playoffs now.
That'd be interesting. I'd really enjoy that.
I think the Angels really royally fucked up.
Oh, yeah, they did. Yes, they did.
But I don't know. Other than that, any other fun thoughts on the ball of recent?
I think I burned everything out. I think I'm good. Thank you so much for tuning in. It was great to have us back in the studio finally.
Yeah, it feels good.
Like we already said, if you hadn't gone back last week, listen to our episode on Oppenheimer and Barbie. Go do that.
So hopefully the people enjoy. But if you're new here, go check out some of that stuff. And if you're wondering what we thought before the season started and you want to catch up on what we are thinking now.
Episode 2.
Kind of fun. Other than that, I think we'll be back next week with some more stuff.
That'll do it.
See you guys next week.
Goodbye.